All right, Jessica, go.
Okay. Well, I was preparing for the test and I was telling folks at work I was preparing for the test. And one of my colleagues was like, well, Jessica, you know the material, so just do a practice test and see if there's anything you need to like shore up on. And I was like, okay, well, that's a good idea. I mean, because I guess she felt I knew the material because I'm always like trying to learn the next big thing. And I go to all the conferences and I go to a lot of workshops and things. And so I mean, I guess that's social work nature, a little bit about everything. So she was like, you know the material, and then, just from the line of work, I'm a school social worker by trade. So you just come across a lot of different things in helping children and families. So I took the practice test, and I remember taking the practice test and um, not doing so well. Well, I did okay, and like diagnosing and like treatment and things like that. So that was where I did a lot of my studying, and I used the Dunn APGAR book, and it came with an online portion. And so I physically read the book because I'm still can't do the online book reading thing. So I had a physical copy, I read the book, and I did the online portions. Like they had clinical terms, like for a crossword puzzle, they had flashcards, they had other games. Um, and that's where I did the practice test. And it actually came with two practice tests, but I did not do the second one. I just did the first one and continued to study. So I used the APGAR book. I Let me see. I listened to a few videos from Agents of Change, a couple of Ray2 videos. I had the DSM-5 on Audible, so I would listen to the and it goes section by section. So I would, on a Saturday, I would listen to depression and how you would diagnose depression and then go from there. Um, and I made it through all those sections. And so let me see. Oh, and then I talked about Agents of Change. They had an acronym called Eat Pie Today. And that is about the social work treatment process. And thank you, Annette, for putting that. It's engagement, assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation, and termination. So I practiced and memorized that acronym because when I was actually at the test, they give you a little whiteboard in case you need to write something down, and I wrote it down on the whiteboard. Because part of what I did with the APGAR, she had some live sessions, and she talked specifically about how to take the test, how to identify what they're saying the problem is, and just like break apart the question. So probably the last week before I actually took the test is I studied on how to take the test, how to answer the questions, what to look for, because they have a lot of first and next and questions like that. And if I remember from the test, because there was a question Quenisha had, it was quite a few. I mean, like, there's a good chunk of questions that are first and next. Because, the test is 170 questions, and 20 of those are always, the screeners, like the testing, I forgot what you call them, but the questions that they're doing. And I could always tell which ones was those questions because every other question had 3 answer choices, like they prepare you. And those questions had 4 answer choices. And I was like, oh, this is one of those screening questions. I forgot what you call them. So I took the test at Pearson and Montgomery. And the one thing that kind of I would say about the testing experience that threw me off was like I didn't realize how thorough they would be. I had on a rubber bracelet, and they were like, "Oh no, you're gonna have to put that in the locker," because all I took with me were keys, a wallet because I needed to have my ID, and that was it. And they were like, no, you have to take that off. So, you do the palm scans, and then I had to read through the testing guidelines and sign off. And then I had to stand. And then before I went into the testing, I had to turn out my pockets, and I had a jacket, and they were like, we need you to put that on. And I had to turn out all the pockets on the jacket. And so they sat me at a little desk in front of the computer, and they had the whiteboard, and they have noise canceling headphones, which later, after I took the test, I realized I was sitting up under a clock, and it's one of those ones you can hear the ticking. So I was kind of glad about those. So the test is in two parts, 85 questions, then the next 85. And in between there, if you know anything about me, I'm like, go through, get it done, do it, do it, do it. But this time I said, nope. I took a break in between. I went to the restroom. They had a water fountain. I just got out and stretched my legs. Now I had to go through the process again of like turning out my pockets and, showing everything that I didn't go out and get anything. And then I finished up the test. And then at the end, that screen come up and it said pass. And I looked, and I kind of like almost looked around a little bit and was like, wait, what? So, yeah, that was my testing experience. Oh, and then I remember from the test, prior to me taking the test, I did go to the supervision workshop in Tuscaloosa. And on my test, I clearly remember there were quite a few questions about supervision, but the supervisor-supervisee relationship, a lot about gerontology, geriatric social work, and child sexual abuse, which I found was interesting. And those are the ones that really stood out, because it seemed like to me, it seemed like it was a lot of questions in those areas. And I was like, yeah, only maybe a handful, maybe about diagnosing or anything like that. And maybe a couple about like what kind of medications someone would use if they have this type of disorder. But going back to the social work process, the Eat Pie Today, that really was helpful with the first next questions, because what AppGuard did was she taught you to identify what stage of the process you were in, and then you can go to so that means, so the question was like, what would you do next? So if you were doing an evaluation, then the next step would be or you're doing assessment, the next step would be to plan, or, if you're just meeting the people, what you do first, then, you want to engage the folks first before you start telling them what to do with their lives. So that was very helpful in answering a lot of the first next questions. And again, the Dunn AppGuard did about how to really break down how to identify with the problem, what it is they're asking you to do, and what step you are in the process, the treatment process. And so mentally, I just finished supervision in February. So mentally, I was like, I was saying, go, go, go. And I did. In March, I did start studying for about a week. And then I realized, I'm tired. So I stopped studying, and and then I didn't understand the process too. And I'm sure we probably went over 100 times, but when I was in there, Renita sent my paperwork saying I completed supervision, and I thought the state board sent you the application saying, okay, go ahead and apply. And I was like, and then somebody's like, no, you have to do the application. And then they looked that up. And so that probably was, and I didn't do that until maybe May. And so I did the application, got my transcripts there, and did everything I need to go ahead and have them say, okay, you can you qualify to take the test. So I might have got that paperwork back late, like maybe like very late May, early June. Because mentally in my head, I want to take that test July, I think it was like July 26th. Don't tell me that it's July 26th, holds no significance, but I just kind of wanted to get it done. And that day was unavailable. So I was like, okay, well, let me look at August. And I knew I'd already signed up for the supervision workshop. And I was like, okay, let's do August 14th. And coincidentally, that August 14th day was doing my church's 21 days of prayer. So from the first day of the 21 days to the day I took the test, I had one prayer, and it was a number 120. Because I knew if I scored a 120, there was no way I would not have passed that test. So, I studied, I did all that. And then, like I said, a few days before the test, a couple of days before the test, I was burned out from studying. So I did not a couple of days before. And so I just woke up and took that test on that day. And there it is. I guess saw that pass screen. So I guess I'm saying all that to say, we know a whole lot more than we give ourselves credit for. So, and when your body is telling you, okay, I'm burned out, I'm tired, listen to it, take that break, and then you feel you need to go back, go back. But listen to your body, because I think I started talking about this test maybe my second year of being in supervision. Like, okay, 1 year down, I'm starting my second year. Okay, I'm going to start studying for this test. So as soon as I'm get done and I get approved, I'm taking that test as soon as I get out of supervision. And that did not happen because my body was telling me mentally, like, you're done, like you're tired. Take a break. So I listened, and I was in a good headspace. And if just in case you're curious about the score I did get, I scored a 113. So, and I think for that particular test, I needed like a 98. So, and I scored a 113. So, um, I was super excited. I was, I did not tell anybody I work with. I only told them I was studying. I did not tell them, um, that I was taking the test. Well, I told our social work coordinator the day before, and I was like, well, I feel like I need to tell somebody. And I was like, well, I'm taking the test tomorrow. And that's the same person who told me, you know the stuff. Just go ahead and, see what you need to study and take the test. And she's like, oh, I'm not worried about that. I know you're going to pass it. So went in and did. And when I got done, I ran straight back to work. I took the day off work because, either way, I was like, either I need to celebrate, or I'm going to need to reset. So I ran to work and I told everybody, I was like, you're looking at Jessica Parker, LICSW. And then my supervisor and everybody was like, yeah. And my supervisor came out and she's like, oh, what's it about you? And I was like, well, I took my clinical test and I passed today. And she's like, oh, congratulations. And I yelled, but that doesn't mean I can do extra stuff. And so everybody was excited. And I was going to wait to change my email signature until I actually physically got the license. They were like, everybody at work was like, you got the letter you passed, right? And I was like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, I would change my, that same day I would have changed my email signature, but I waited about a week or so. And then I did. And so I've just been dragging my feet because I did do the supervision course. So now I need to submit that so I can be LICSW-S. I want all the letters now. Uh, and eventually I may be reaching back out because I want to do the PIP. I know technically you don't need it really anymore, but I want all the letters now. So
Congratulations, Jessica. We do have some questions, and I do want to speak on the PIP. There is a reason to get the PIP, and we do have an after supervision PIP program. If, for those of you who are one, there is a reason if you want to do a certain track. So we can talk about that in a minute. But we have some questions. Um, I think you answered Quinn's about where there are a lot of questions about first next. And Jessica said, you already mentioned how long you studied, if you want to do anything about that. But then Quinn asked, did you feel the exam was harder, easier, or about what you expected?
um um I probably studied from maybe about I took it in August, and I really started back in June. So I took maybe 2.5 months I studied. And maybe I might have started in May. So let's say about 3 months I studied for the test. And the test, it was kind of, I guess it's what I expected, but I guess I expect, but just in the sense of, about the level of knowledge and knowing how to take the test. But I guess I didn't expect that. To me, it felt so heavy in just certain areas and not like over the whole gauntlet of what you prepare for and like by using a study guidebook. So if that makes sense, like there wasn't a lot of human development. I know they don't score those, they don't have a lot of questions of theirs of that anyway, but I don't know. I guess I thought it'll be a little more like equal about the questions from the section. And I guess, so I guess I would recommend though, if you about treatment and what's that other section? But yeah, the treatment and things like that, if you I would like I would say a lot of the questions were based out of that area. The assessment and treatment, what they call it? I can't remember. Because I put all those study books away. I was like, woohoo. Um, but I do recommend too that when somebody told me take the practice test to kind of see where you score, and that helped narrow down. So it's like, of course, you want to study a little bit of everything, but if you're strong in human development, why don't dedicate so much time to that when you need to look at the psychoanalysis or whatever that section is of the test. I can't think of it. You need to practice that more, study that more. So no, and I did not. No, my study guide came with a practice test. So I looked at the ASWB practice test, and I can be frugal at times. I was like, I'm not going to pay $60 for that, so I just did the practice test that came with my study guide. But I know it was recommended to me to take that one, so you can really get a real feel of what that test is going to be like. So if you want to spend that money, it'd be well worth it, because the APGAR book cost me, a little over $100 to buy. So, I mean, I guess I probably I could have invested that extra money to take the ASWB practice test, but that came with 2. So, no, well, okay.
Read the question, Jessica, so the
Okay.
people who don't have access to chat on the recording will know how you're answering it.
Okay. Do you have the link to the audio DSM? I think I dropped that in the clinical thing before, but I'll do it again. Because it was the DSM for like taking the test, so I'll drop that in the group me again. And how long would you say the rechecking you process took? Do you feel like it took a lot of time from your test? No, because they stop the clock. After you take the first section, you're able to go take a break. And even before, like, they don't start the test until you click start. And then when I took the break, they have a little timer up there, and they give you, I think I want to say it's 10 or 15 minutes. And so, like, I knew I couldn't lollygag, but I went and got a change of scenery, and then came back. But yeah, the clock didn't start until I was actually physically in there and clicked like start test. So I don't think it took away from my exam time. And okay, that is it.
I have some questions, and I want to get some clarification too. One, how long ago did you take your LMSW?
I took my LMSW in 2012.
Okay, so this was a completely different. I wanted people to hear that part. Yeah, so you took it in 2012, and so this was a completely different, because we didn't get breaks and no palm scanning, none of that back then.
I remember that.
Yeah.
You did not. It's like you had to push through and sit there however long it took you to get through those questions. and then hope you get, I mean, the only thing that's the same is that you get that screen at the end that says pass or fail. So, but yeah, I took my LMSW at 2012. And so even being in the supervision group was like, you know, a lot of y'all are a lot younger than me. Um, so it's like, am I gonna, you see now I'm struggling remembering stuff, but it's like, am I gonna retain this? And you know, that's why I planned a year before me even finishing supervision to start studying, because there was a real concern for me about retaining the material and being able to take the test, because I mean, I got my MSW in 1995. So I mean, it's been a while.
But,
So
but look at you, Jessica Parker. Look at you. I have a question about the break, because that's a new thing that I'm hearing. Like 5 people who've come back have shared about the break, and I just want to get clarification. The test starts, you hit start, 85 questions. There is a timer. And what I've heard is 10 minutes. They give you 10 minutes, but you can see that you have 10 minutes. And then, so you can't just be like, I'm taking a break. You got to be within that 10-minute window, come back, and then do you hit start again and the remaining of the time finishes out, or how does that work?
Well, if I remember correctly, it broke it down. Like you had 2 hours to do the 85 questions, took the 10-minute break, and then when you came back, you had another 2 hours to do the other 85 questions. And there's a little timer in the corner to let you know how much time you have. And I sat there, I thought about it, I processed it. Oh, because this is another tip I learned. I think I learned when I took my LM all those years ago. If you're kind of on the fence, flag it. So, you know, I didn't flag everything because, like, you know, it's like retaking the test, but the ones I really could not really felt I really struggled to kind of process, I flagged that question. And, you know, honestly, it was a question. If I knew it, I knew it, you know, and I said, I tried to dedicate at least a minute for every question, like, you know, so I could really sit there and process it. And if I knew it, I knew it. You know, I processed it and I could do an answer. If I didn't know it, I didn't waste a whole lot of time with it. So I just tried to make the best guess I could and moved on. But I did flag questions. So at the end, I went back and looked at the flag ones and tried to go through that process again. The eat pie today, make sure I didn't add anything. I understood what the problem was and I answered the question correctly. And that's how I do it. So I do recommend only the ones where you're really like the answers are really close and you really might need some extra time. I would say flag it. And so maybe at the end of each session, there might have been 10 questions I flagged. And so, and I just went back to really rethink those and make sure the answer I put in there, I mean, I answered it and then I flagged it to go back because just in case time ran out, I want to make sure there was an answer in there. And then just we went back and rechecked my thinking and the question. And they give you an orientation at the beginning of the test about this is how you flag it, this is how you go back and check and stuff like that. So at the end, before you submit, they was like, you flagged these questions. So I went back and double checked, and then you click the submit. And then, well, after the first part, that's when it's like, okay, now you can have your 10-minute break. And so, which I elect to take. And then you came back and the same thing. It's the same thing.
You I had acronyms, and so I guess I wanted to ask the EPI today, which I love. And Anel, you knew the answer to that when Jessica was stumbling a little bit. I would love, because one of the things you said, Jessica, before we hit record, is that you did come to the Guises of Supervision of Social Work study group for ASWB. I know like Latasha and Quinn, I don't know who else are coming on next Saturday to that study group. And so, one, we want to encourage, and I heard you say it was helpful, but I want to then now include this acronym: engagement, assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation, and termination. I missed one part. If you Can give us a little bit more detail about that so that we can add that to our study group? And were there any other acronyms that were helpful for you?
Um, I think that one was really the most helpful acronym. And when you see it written out, like the T is like a little t, meaning it doesn't represent anything. So that's why the EA, then when I saw it, it's a little t because it didn't represent anything. Then PI, planning, intervention, evaluation, and then T for today, for termination. So, I'm trying to think, was there any other acronyms that no, that because the Eat Pie today was just the most helpful, especially about understanding and going through those questions with the social work treatment process. So that was the most helpful, especially I can't stress with the first and next questions, because if you can identify where you are in the process, then you'll know that next. Because again, like if I'm at, and if I'm just meeting the people and it says, what I do first, I know I want engagement is first. You always got to build the rapport first. If I've assessed or done anything like that, so now what do you do next after you've had an assessment? Well, then we're going to go into planning. So, yeah, that was the most helpful, particularly with decoding those questions.
While we're on that one, I want Anel. Yeah, good. Anel, I was about to come to you. Do you want
So
to add anything to that?
I was gonna add just something because I know Jessica also mentioned RayTube. He actually uses the same acronym too. I think he calls it something else, but it's the exact same thing. So whatever is helpful for you to remember the acronym, I think it's what people name it, but it's the exact same thing. It's the engagement assessment, all that first. And so I actually, Jessica, I don't think you were on that Zoom whenever I had shared that I had taken the exam and I failed it by 4 points. But I had actually been studying from the Agents of Change, and so I'm very familiar with that. And I will say that was really helpful. I think the problem that I ran into was that sometimes um like I started from the very beginning. I couldn't like get myself to figure out like where I was in the helping process. And so I was constantly having to be like, have I engaged? Have I assessed? Have I, and so I think that kind of shook me up some. And then also just to give an update on that, because I just heard back this week from the board. I had shared that I just did not feel, I'm glad you mentioned this too about like your headspace and just, just everything like spiritually, just everything when you felt you had a specific date, but you didn't feel ready and stuff like that. And it was just like all in God's planning. Um, I had planned to take the exam this year again. And I was telling Renita and everyone, like Katrina and everyone else in that Zoom, that don't, I just did not feel ready. I just don't think it's my time just yet with everything that's going on. I'm super pregnant and I just have so much going on. And so I did reach out to the board because I had already paid the $75, I think it's like 79 with tax or whatever, the fee for it. But I told them that I just, I was going under medical care right now and that I just did not, I did want to take the exam. I was paying for the exam or for the permission for the exam, but I wanted to take it another date. And so they did tell me, because my expiration date was for November 30th, they did say that they can't change the expiration date because what's set in stone is set in stone as far as what they have for you. But they did mention that I could email them and just tell them that I made an error in pay and I would like a refund, and they actually did refund me. So just for everybody else, I told Brittany and everybody else, like if they can't, that's fine. I'd rather lose $79 versus 200 and however much for the exam. But they were actually able to refund me. You just have to email them and let them know that you're needing a refund. And they didn't ask like specifics as far as like what type of medical care or anything like that. Um, but just so that you guys are aware. So I definitely plan once I have the baby, to study more and um, take what everyone has said into consideration as far as like what's been helpful to them and things like that, because that's helpful to me.
Mhm. And I see Quinn asked, did you experience any anxiety surrounding the test? And if so, what did you do to manage it? And yeah, I was nervous, but my mantra for that test was 120. So whenever I felt like, okay, oh Lord, what are they asking me? And what is that? And then I said 120. I always recentered around that. And so I just and you have the whiteboard. So whatever helps you, like I said, I wrote down that acronym so I could, reference it. So maybe you need to write something on there that would help you. But for me, it was going back to my mantra 120. Because I mean, it's nerve-wracking because you've prepared for this, you spend a lot of time preparing. It is not a cheap exam, so there's some anxiety that comes with it. And then again, like I said, I was worried about what I was going to remember and things like that. So, but for me, what helped with that was the mantra of 120, and everything just circled back around to that. When I said that, I was like, okay. And and like really too, and just taking my time. You have the little timer, you have 85 minutes. I mean, you have 2 hours, which is 120 minutes, is 85 questions. And like I said, I was giving myself at least 1 minute per question. So, and really that is like kind of like for me, it was enough time. So to give myself 1 minute per question to really sit there and think about it. And again, even though I gave an answer, if I felt still kind of like iffy about it, I flagged it. But I made a conscious effort too, not to flag everything, because it's like, you're trying to you looking at the whole test again, and you might second guess yourself from an answer that was correct. So I've just put those, I just really used like all the tools they had available, the noise canceling headphone. Like, I mean, it was quiet when I walked in there to my testing spot. It was quiet. I mean, you could hear, what they say, a mouse peeing on cotton, but I still use the noise canceling headphones to make sure I was not going to be, it's almost like they canceled me from my thoughts too. Like, it canceled my thoughts too. So I didn't want any extra distractions. So I probably really didn't need them, but I used them. And I used the whiteboard and to write down things that I know I wanted to remember while I took the test. So I say use everything there to your advantage. So if it's writing down that acronym or any other acronyms you use to study, use it. Use that whiteboard. Just use everything they give you.
I wanted to make a point of something you said, Jessica, because one of the things I know to be true about Jessica is she has gone to all the conferences. Like Montgomery Public School System has paid for her to go to the conferences, and or she has, invested in that. I think that is so important because the test is vignettes, y'all. They're stories, right? And so when you're going to these conferences and you're learning about this information in a different way than the textbook and or the book or whatever the thing is, but you're getting the information from a different viewpoint or perspective, and or I think that's important. And I wrote down gerontology social work. I've heard that a few times, Jessica, that's been a lot of the questions on the test, that in the supervision. And I think the gerontology social work is because the baby boomers are aging out, and they want to make sure that you guys are prepared to deal with that population. And so I want to say, if you're not planning to come to the Remember Me conference on November 1st, because Jessica's going to be there. Oh, Jessica, I need to talk to you about that too. Jessica's going to be there. Invest in yourself, going to conferences, and even if it's online, because I think that can help with how you're getting the information and retaining it, because it's not just like Jessica said, in a book. I think you said, Jessica, you're not reading books on a screen. You still need that tactile way of learning, and I think conferences is a way to do that. And I did not know about even though you said you put in the group me, I did not know about the DSM-5 on audio. And so I'm so glad you're going to be putting that into the group me as well. I did have one last question. You you said that you realized that research wasn't a strong point for you. And you're the first person who talked about, maybe you're not, but research questions. Once you took the practice test and you realized research wasn't a strong point, in what way did you get familiar with the research questions, I guess?
Well, I had a book that was called Social Work Best Practices, and it talks about research. Like, I knew about research and treatment things, like, and discussing it with your client and saying, hey, this has been proved to work with depression and stuff like that. But actually, like, the terms, like knowing what you call the different groups, the data groups and stuff. And again, I'm drawing a blank, but being able to say, like, if you had this type of group, let me see if I can research group. So about being able to understand that terminology. So that's why I use that book, which I'd already like, what's qualitative research, see, and stuff like that, like being able to identify, like, if you do this type of study, is it qualitative or what type of research it was. So like the very specifics of what it is, that, so things like that.
Did you end up seeing research questions on your test?
Yeah, there were a few. There were a few.
All right, we got 10 minutes left, and did anybody else have a question for Jessica before I'm going to answer Jessica Ott's question about the process after supervision? But before I do that, did anyone else have a question for Jessica Parker? I love having both the Jessicas back. It was fun for a while. All right, so Jessica Parker, I'm so glad, and like Jessica Ott said, you brought up what happens after supervision. So, and Nell could pipe in too if she wants to, but after supervision, I try to give myself a week. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but I will fill out your supervision verification form and send it to you to sign, and then I mail it into the board. What I tell people is you're not going to hear from the board. You're not going to hear anything from the board. You know how when you got approved for supervision and we got that letter and I sent it to you, they don't do none of that afterwards. They're like, all right, it's on you. And so what happens is I'll send that in and I'll mail it in the email. I'll tell you after I've mailed it, I'm like, thank you. I'm putting it to the post office tomorrow. I take it to the post office, y'all. I do not mail it from my house to make sure it gets to where it needs to go. And I always say, give it about a week. After a week, after I've sent you that email and told you I took it to the post office, go onto your clinical application, clinical exam application. You can go onto it now if you wanted to. You know what I mean? I mean, it's available to you, but why say wait a week when you go to apply for your clinical exam or to get approved for your clinical exam? That is when the board will upload the supervision verification form. And so that's how you'll know if you got approved or not, is because they don't send it and say anything. And if after 1 and or 2 weeks you haven't, because, snail mail, they take a bit to go to the post office, whatever. And so after the second week, if you are checking your clinical application and it hasn't been uploaded to your application, then that's when I tell you guys to email and or call the board to see what the issue is, because there has been but Miss Dickerson is really good in that she will email me if I haven't checked a box. It's known to happen. I'm human, right? If I haven't checked a box or whatever, she'll be like, "Can I check this for you?" I'm like, "Yes." But there's other things that could keep you from not getting approved. And so the sooner you can find that out, the better it is for all of us. Okay. And so check with the board by emailing them and or calling if after you've checked your clinical application and you haven't seen it uploaded to the board. That clinical application is the $75 application Anel was talking about. After you've done that clinical application and your supervision verification has been approved and they're like, you're good to go, that's when you'll get a letter from the board, an email from the board saying you're approved to take the exam. Here's your PIN number. Then you go to ASWB's website and you'll put in that PIN number in order for ASWB to then ask you to pay $260. Does that make sense? I know I've said it before, but Jessica, I say it in different supervision sessions, so you may not have been on when I've said it. I know Tiffany and Kimberly are like, say it again in another year, and I will. But for those of you who are getting closer, know that you gotta check on your application a week or two after you get done, after I've sent it off. If you don't see it, make sure you contact the board, because I think you guys have heard Jamie say she waited a year before she even applied, and she didn't know that the time is ticking from the time that I've sent that letter in. And when I say the time is ticking, you got a year after I've sent that supervision verification letter in to apply to take your test, okay? But then after you get approved, guess what? You have a year to take your test. And you can take your test. That's one of the things that Nell was talking about. Within that year, you can take your test up to 3 times. And then you just have to apply again and pay that $75 again. Okay? Does that make sense? I'm looking at everybody's face.
I'm just going to add something really quick, because I actually made like a notes thing on my phone for the whole entire process, just so, whenever I pass and I I'm the one, telling everybody my experience, to have it down and stuff. But just so that you guys are aware, like Renita said, that's true about like giving them some time to wait, like to, get everything together and stuff, because you're not going to hear from them. I think I gave them about 2 weeks just in case, before I, did anything. But when you are applying to the board, just remember that on the application, you have to know your previous license exam date and your passing date. So that's something that Ariel and I were talking about, but that's something that I could not remember. And I had to like dig through emails and emails to find like when I took my exam and when I passed it for my master's. So now, I have it and it's all good and stuff. And what I actually did, when I did when I applied to the board, I actually printed the confirmation, everything, because it'll print the whole entire form. So it'll, if for some reason you have to, go back and pay for it again, whatever it is, when you have to reapply to the board, you already have all the information there. All you have to do is go back and like put that in. And then I do recommend, even if it's just like anxiety or whatever it is, like if you have any test anxiety or anything, to do the non-standard testing arrangements. That's something I always do, but that's because I do the ESL, because English is my second language. So I do the special accommodations for it. And then with that, all you do is apply for it. It's free. You apply for it, and then they'll email you a confirmation about you being accepted for that. And then you just, register and pay for the exam.
Y'all, whenever a nail tells people that English is her second language, do y'all know how super impressive that is? That is so super impressive to me. And she's taking this exam that is already, and she's having to do it in a second language. And now I hope you give yourself so much grace and love about how far you've come and what you've accomplished, because that to me, every time you tell me, I'm just going to be, my socks are always going to be blown off. But I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes, because I don't know if y'all seen, but my goal was try to drink this whole bottle of water during supervision. Now I have got to go run to the restroom. But Tiffany put in the comments, I was going to say something about the PIP. I think the PIP is still valuable, even though I got the PIP so that I could do supervision independently of an organization. And then in 2022, I think it was they changed it to LICSW, and the PIP they said wasn't needed anymore. But then in 2024, only people who have the PIP can be are able to do home studies for adoptions. And y'all, when I tell you attorney offices are contacting me on a regular basis and DHR because they don't have any, because they need someone to come and do these home studies for adoptions for family members and for non-family members. I don't have the bandwidth and or the time, but we have a whole goddess and social work community who might want an extra stream of income. And I remember when I used to do home studies, the attorneys would do, they paid for your mileage and your gas and whatever fee you charge them by the hour to do these home stays, and then for whatever documentation you wrote up for the court system. So this is big bucks to get this PIP. And y'all, like Jessica said, y'all are much younger than us. So y'all still have energy to go do that kind of stuff. And so getting the PIP to me is still a valuable thing to have if you're wanting an extra stream of income, especially here in Alabama. Plus, like Jessica said, the letters look good behind your name. So Tiffany or whoever just asked that question, I have a 6-week after LCSW program that I do in order for you guys to get the PIP. It's just extra supervision, and we talk about home studies and all of that. And so for those of you who are wanting to do that after supervision, you just reach out and I'll let you know about the program. So I think it is, go ahead and sign me up. I think I've already done 2 previous goddesses. I would love to do it in a group kind of, because that one-on-one is a little, but but the way y'all are getting your licenses, I'll do it however we need to do it. So we do have an after supervision, after clinical license PIP path. So that if that is something you're interested in, we can do that as well. Jessica Parker, LICSW. We are so super proud of you. So super, and y'all, I can say this because Jessica came in, I'm just going to say, and she knows it, she came in so mousy. And I would be like, girl, you are a badass social worker. What are you doing? What are you doing? And now she's walking in it easily and effortlessly. And so to see this, and did she mention she got MSW in 1995? Honey, you are an inspiration. You are an inspiration. And happy belated birthday to you, darling. This is a wonderful way to bring in your year. Love this for you. Yes, go be great. All right, you guys, I gotta go into the restroom. I will see you guys in the next supervision. Bye. Proud of you, Jessica.
Thank you.